Tressa Donnelly was born in 1940 to an English mother and an Irish father. She was brought up in the leafy London suburb of Greenwich, but as a teenager in the early 60s, she was quickly drawn to the bright lights of the vibrant London club scene.
I, of course, got involved in this world of jazz clubs and artists and writers and poets and all those things. I was in a relationship with, as the women's magazines would say, an older man, and he was a jazz musician. I was very young. I think I was probably about 19 when I first met him, and he was 31. And then I got pregnant and I decided I wasn't going to tell him, and I didn't. I ran away.
When Tressa told her mother she was pregnant, the effect of the news was devastating.
We were an upstanding family, so of course when all this happened, it was an absolute disaster.
Through the local convent, her mother organised for her to be sent to a private nursing home in Dublin to have her baby.
Mum paid. I was a paying guest. I read a lot. I used to go to the library. I used to play classical music on the radio so that my baby would hear this lovely music, and I'd read aloud so that he'd get a really good education through me. And I'd read him poetry and stuff.
While in the nursing home in Dublin, on the 13th of March 1961, Tressa gave birth to her son, André.
I leapt off that table, would you believe? And I went down a flight of stairs to the telephone in the hallway, and I phoned my mum. And I said, I've just had a little boy. And she said, oh, right. And that was the end of the conversation. That's the only thing she ever mentioned. Never, ever mentioned ever again.
When she realised there was no way she could bring the baby back home to London, Tressa came up with another plan.
I asked the people in the nursing home if I could stay there with them and work in Dublin, and them look after the baby for me while I was at work. And they said, no, married women don't go to work in Ireland. In fact, I found out they already had a family in mind for me. Well, I was told under no circumstances should I touch him, because it wouldn't be fair, because the first holdings of the new baby should be with the adopted mother, because she had to bond. I wasn't to bond, because it would be destructive to the child. So he was at the foot of my bed and he was making little baby noises, little ticking noises. I, in fact, did pick him up very guiltily, and in fact I christened him. I baptised him with some water that I had in the room with his name. And then but I didn't tell anybody, because I had actually touched him and I wasn't meant to. Put him back in the cot. That's what happened that night. And then first thing in the morning they came and took him away. And that was the last I saw of him.
50 years later, Tressa is still haunted by memories of that traumatic spring morning in Dublin.
I did see the people come. They weren't young. I looked over the banister and I could see them downstairs going into the front room, which was the visitors' room, and I knew what they were there for. A couple of days after André's birth, I was given these 3 sheets of paper to sign, and to be quite honest with you, I didn't know what I was signing. I was in a tiz. I mean, I signed them all, the 3 of them, on the same day, one after the other, and I shouldn't have done. I should have signed one of those much later.
The papers Tressa signed were formally to consent to having her son legally adopted through the adoption agency. However, Tressa had never heard of the address in Dublin listed as her residence, nor was the signing witnessed, although there was a solicitor's signature added later. According to the 1952 Adoption Act, the final consent form should only have been signed by Tressa 6 months after André's birth, giving her time to change her mind if she wanted to.
My mother said to me, I must never tell anybody, especially not a man. Nobody will want you because you're soiled goods, that's right. And a man will never want to bring up another man's child, so never. And, you know, the child will suffer because it will be ostracised. You mustn't do that.
Tressa married Dennis Reeves in 1962. They'd been friends since they were 15.
I realised after I married Dennis, and when I used to get upset and cry about it, that he was always very nice, that of course I could have kept him and Dennis would have taken him on.
When they had their own first child, a little girl called Miranda, Tressa found memories of her young son Andre came flooding back.
I used to get terribly upset because I would wonder whether, is she feeding him properly? What's he wearing? Is he when the kids all get mumps and measles and chickenpox, has he got those? I did worry a lot about whether he was all right, and I was desperate to find out whether he was all right. When I went back to Dublin some years later to try and find him, and I went to the agency, and they said to me that they had no files. Was I sure I'd had this child? I went up to the house, and the girl who answered the door was the midwife. And she said to me, "Oh, I knew you'd come back." And she said, "There's no record of it. You won't be able to ever find him because there's no paperwork or record of where he went or anything like that. I'm really sorry."
Devastated at the news that the adoption agency had no record of her having given birth, and therefore there was no way of finding her son, Tressa spent the following 20 years bringing up her 4 daughters with her husband Dennis. She then decided to approach the agency again to find out more about Andre's adoption.
It didn't cross my mind that it wasn't a legal adoption, not until I got a letter from the director. And in this one, for instance, I was told that Andre was placed with a family in Ireland in March 1961. This family appears to have taken him as their own, and there was no formal adoption order made. The family had another child adopted in the same way. Now, that was the first time I knew that he wasn't formally adopted. He wasn't legally adopted.
Information from the adoption agency led Tressa to believe that Andre had been registered as the natural son of his adoptive parents and not as her son. His date of birth was also changed on his official birth certificate, which is a legal document. No record of his actual birth or adoption existed.
There was no way of him tracing us if he wanted to. He couldn't trace me because my name wasn't anywhere in his life. Information was given to me, and that was about him wearing glasses and being good at handball, and he was a good boy at school, and then later on he got married apparently and had 3 children. Then another time I was told that he was divorced and he went to Australia, but the mother said that she wouldn't let him know that he was adopted because he might get upset. I was fortunate enough to be able to go back a couple of years ago, and I registered him myself, and this is the birth certificate that I should have been able to find years ago. And I did go down and get it, and I'm very pleased that I did get it. That is his birth certificate, Andre Donnelly, Monday the 13th of March 1961, male, 37 Hoath Road, County Dublin, Ireland, my name on it. I'm not necessarily wanting to find him. I do, of course, but what is more important than that is him finding me. He needs to know that he's got a mother, a natural mother, and that he's got sisters and cousins and things over here. That's what needs to happen. He might not want to meet me at his age, but he needs to know I exist. That's the important thing, I think.
Tressa's husband Dennis worked all over the world as an engineer, but in 2005 they moved to Penzance in Cornwall.
I mean, the reason we came down here was because our eldest daughter got very sick with cancer, and we came down here to mind her and to mind her children.
Miranda was the eldest of Dennis and Tressa's 4 daughters, and she and Tressa had a particularly strong bond.
She said she had 3 sisters and a brother. Yes, she always did that, yes. And she called her youngest child, the one who lives with me, Gabriel Andre. All the years I was doing my search, we had an arrangement that if I died, she would take the search on. but there's no need for that now. 2 years after my daughter died, my husband died, and I couldn't take that, and I gave up all my hobbies, really. Just getting through the day, I think. I get mad about it, but I can't really afford inside my head to get that mad because it's too upsetting. I've got to keep going because I've got a job to do with bringing up kids and stuff. But it does make me mad, yes. I will keep going, yeah. I don't know for how long, really. I'm getting old now. When this all started, my red hair started to go grey, and I was very surprised to see I had this little white cap underneath this one. And I immediately got sad because I thought, if ever my son turns up, he will never have known me as a redhead. Isn't that funny? That's what I thought. I was quite sad about that. He would never have seen me with red hair. There you are.